I never cared much for family drama. If anything, I avoided it like the plague. But my Aunt Karen? She thrived on it. For as long as I can remember, Karen considered herself the boss of the family. No one actually appointed her to that position, but that never stopped her from acting like she had some divine right to dictate how the rest of us lived. She had an opinion about everything: marriages, careers, parenting, even how someone should decorate their house. But for some reason, I was her favorite target. According to her, I wasn't living right. "You're 30, Emily," she'd say at every family gathering, usually after a few glasses of cheap wine. "When are you going to get a real job? Freelancing isn't a career, sweetheart. It's a hobby. One day, you'll wish you listened to me." It didn't matter that I made good money as a freelance illustrator. It didn't matter that I had clients from all over the country, that I was doing what I loved, and that I wasn't financially struggling. In Karen's eyes, because I didn't have a traditional 9-to-5 job with a cubicle and a boss breathing down my neck, I was a failure. The worst part? My parents never defended me. They'd just exchange awkward glances and change the subject, like they were afraid of setting her off. My cousins mostly ignored her, too busy with their own lives to care. I tolerated it for years. I'd roll my eyes, nod along, and let it slide. But the last family gathering? That was the moment I decided enough was enough. It was my mother's birthday, which meant the whole family was gathered at my parents' house for dinner. I arrived late, partially because I had a client call run over, but mostly because I was dreading the inevitable conversation with Karen. Sure enough, as soon as I stepped through the door, she was on me like a hawk. Well, if it isn't our starving artist," she said loudly, making sure everyone in the living room heard. I forced a smile. "Hey, Karen. Busy drawing cartoons, were you?" she asked, swirling her wine. "You know, some of us have real jobs with real responsibilities." I bit my tongue. "Yep, busy working." Karen scoffed. "Oh, come on, Emily. You're 30. You can't seriously think doodling for strangers on the internet is a sustainable career." I clenched my jaw. I could feel my patience thinning, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me snap. "Actually, I make more money than the average office worker," I said evenly. "And I set my own hours. It's pretty sustainable." Karen rolled her eyes and turned to the rest of the family. "You see? This is the problem with her generation. No sense of reality. Everyone thinks they can just follow their passion, and money will magically appear." A few people chuckled uncomfortably. My dad cleared his throat and reached for more bread. My mom busied herself refilling glasses. No one was going to step in. Fine. I'd handle it myself. I took a deep breath. "Karen, remind me, what exactly do you do for a living?" The room went quiet. Karen blinked at me, like she couldn't believe I had the audacity to ask. "I manage the household," she said stiffly. "Right," I said, nodding. "So you don't have a job?" Her face turned red. "Excuse me. I mean, by your own logic, you're not employed," I continued. "You rely on Uncle Greg's income. So if we're talking about sustainable careers, shouldn't you be worried about that?" My cousin Brian choked on his drink. My mom shot me a warning look. "But Karen?" Karen looked like she was ready to strangle me. "I raised children," she snapped. "I maintained a home. That is work." "I agree," I said. "So why don't you respect other people's work? Just because I don't sit in an office doesn't mean I don't work hard." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You sit around drawing all day. And yet, I pay my rent on time every month," I shot back. "Without relying on someone else's income." The silence in the room was deafening. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, looking furious. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I should have let it go. But years of her passive-aggressive comments had built up, and now that I had started, I wasn't stopping. "You know what?" I said, standing up. "Let's make a bet." Karen narrowed her eyes. "A bet?" I nodded. "Since you're so sure I can't survive with my cartoons, why don't I prove you wrong? Give me a month. In that time, I'll make enough money to cover my rent, bills, and expenses without touching my savings. And to make it interesting, let's say I'll even take on extra expenses." Karen crossed her arms. "And if you fail? Then I'll admit you were right," I said. "And I'll apply for a real job." My mom gasped. "Emily, you don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted. "I'm tired of her acting like I'm some clueless kid. If I win, Karen, you admit you were wrong. Publicly. No more comments, no more jabs. You leave me alone." Karen smirked. "Fine. But when you fail, I get to pick the job you apply for." That gave me pause. "And it has to be a real job," she added. "A corporate job. None of this art nonsense." I hesitated, but then nodded. "Deal." We shook hands, and just like that, the battle had begun. The moment I shook hands with Karen, I knew I had made a mistake. It wasn't because I doubted my ability to prove her wrong. No, I knew I could make money as a freelancer. I had been doing it for years. But what I didn't anticipate was just how far Karen would go to ensure that I failed on her terms. The very next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "We start today. Meet me at the mall at 11 a.m. You need a wardrobe that says, 'Employed Adult.'" I groaned, already regretting everything. At exactly 11:05 a.m., I walked into the most expensive clothing store in the mall, where Karen was already waiting with an armful of blazers. She looked me up and down and sighed dramatically. "You dress like a college student who still thinks she has dreams," she declared, shoving a navy blue suit at me. "That stops today." I opened my mouth to argue, but she had already pushed me toward the dressing room. 3 hours and $2,000 later, I walked out of that store looking like someone's miserable corporate assistant. Karen had picked out stiff blouses, knee-length pencil skirts, and shoes that felt like torture devices. Gone were my comfortable jeans, my oversized sweaters, my sneakers. You look presentable now, Karen said approvingly. You'll never get a real job dressed like a street artist. I felt ridiculous. But the nightmare was just beginning. Karen's so-called rescue plan was a disaster on every level. The first step? Financial security. You need a steady income, Karen insisted over lunch. Freelancing is gambling, and you're terrible with money. I found an opportunity for you to invest in a business. A smart woman would take it. I should have known better. I should have known. Karen introduced me to Linda, a woman in her early 40s with an unsettlingly enthusiastic smile and a PowerPoint presentation on financial freedom. It's foolproof, Linda chirped, clicking to the next slide, which featured images of women in luxury cars and tropical vacations. This cosmetics company is revolutionizing the industry. All you need to do is invest in your starter kit, and you'll be making thousands in no time. Karen beamed. I already signed up. And Emily, since you need help, I talked to Linda about getting you in at an exclusive level. You just need to invest $5,000 to get started. I hesitated. $5,000 is a lot. Karen scoffed. Oh please. If you weren't wasting your money on coffee and nonsense, you'd have plenty saved up. This is a real opportunity. I knew it sounded like a scam. But between Karen's pressuring and Linda's relentless sales pitch, I caved. I transferred the money. A week later, I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The high-end cosmetics were cheap, off-brand garbage. No one wanted to buy them. And when I asked Linda about getting my money back, she just laughed. Oh honey, that's not how it works. You just need to hustle. Start by selling to your friends and family. I tried. No one wanted them. Not even my mother. Karen, of course, blamed me. You're not trying hard enough, she snapped. I made my first sale already. To my uncle, who had no choice. My $5,000 were gone. And just like that, I was financially drowning. Next, Karen forced me to job hunt. You're 30 with no real work experience, she said bluntly. Your resume is pathetic. But don't worry, I fixed it. I stared at the document she handed me. Karen had completely rewritten my resume. Gone was any mention of freelancing or art. Instead, she had added random office skills I didn't have and listed me as having assistant managerial experience under a company I'd never worked for. Karen, this is lying, I said. It's strategic embellishment, she corrected. No one gets a job without fudging their resume a little. Against my better judgment, I started applying. I bombed every interview. One hiring manager glanced at my resume and frowned. You listed advanced Excel skills. Can you tell me how you'd create a pivot table? My mind went blank. Oh, what? Another interviewer narrowed her eyes. You wrote that you have experience in corporate scheduling. Can you explain how you would optimize an executive's calendar for a high-paced work environment? I stammered out a nonsense answer. Not a single company called me back. Karen was furious. How hard is it to get a simple office job? She fumed. Do you want to fail? At this point, I was broke, unemployed, and dressed like a business intern from the 1980s. But Karen wasn't finished ruining my life. You're single because you have unrealistic standards, she announced one morning. That changes now. I've set up 2 dates for you this week. I groaned. Karen, I don't need help dating. Don't argue. These are quality men. They were not. The first was a guy named Brad. 35, slicked back hair, expensive watch. The moment we sat down, he launched into a monologue about cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is just the beginning, he said, leaning forward like he was revealing a great secret. Smart investors know that the real money is in altcoins. Have you heard of Dogecoin? Most people don't understand its potential. He spent 2 hours explaining blockchains to me. I barely spoke 5 words. The second guy, Richard, was worse. Let's cut to the chase, he said as soon as we sat down. Are you willing to be a stay-at-home wife? I nearly choked on my drink. What? He shrugged. I don't believe in women working. It disrupts the family structure. My ideal wife stays home, raises kids, and supports her man. I stood up and left. Karen was furious. Do you want to be alone forever? She screeched. You sabotaged both those dates. I sabotaged them? Karen, one of them wanted me to quit my non-existent job to be his unpaid maid. Richard is a traditional man with values. I threw up my hands. This experiment is a disaster. My finances are ruined. My career is non-existent. I look ridiculous, and now you're trying to marry me off to lunatics. Karen crossed her arms. You're the one who agreed to the bet. If you don't like it, maybe it's because you can't handle real life. I wanted to scream. I had 1 week left to prove myself before Karen declared victory. And at this rate, I was going to lose. By the time the next family gathering rolled around, I was ready for war. I had spent the past few weeks documenting everything, every failure, every financial loss, every humiliating moment that had come directly from following Karen's advice. I had screenshots of text messages, emails from rejection letters, even a spreadsheet showing exactly how much money I had lost. Karen had spent years pretending she was the family's guiding light, the all-knowing expert on life. But this time, I was going to prove, once and for all, that she wasn't just wrong. She was actively ruining lives. The family had gathered at my parents' house for one of our usual Sunday dinners. My mom had made roast chicken, my dad was pouring drinks, and everyone was chatting. Karen, of course, was in her usual spot, holding court at the head of the conversation. Honestly, I don't know why people struggle so much with money, she was saying. If you just make smart choices, invest wisely, dress for success, network, it's not hard to get ahead in life. I took a deep breath, stood up, and cleared my throat. Actually, I said, I'd love to talk about smart choices. Karen turned to me, smirking. Oh, did you finally get a real job? No, I said, pulling my laptop out of my bag and setting it on the table. I actually wanted to go over how your advice has completely destroyed my life over the past month. The room went silent. My cousin Brian raised an eyebrow. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Karen let out a sharp laugh. Oh, don't be dramatic, Emily. Dramatic. I clicked open a PowerPoint presentation I had prepared. Let's go over the facts, shall we? I clicked to the first slide. Financial ruin. The pyramid scheme disaster. I turned to my Uncle Greg, Karen's husband. Greg, did you know Karen convinced me to invest $5,000 in a cosmetics pyramid scheme? Greg's face turned pale. She what? I pulled up screenshots of my texts with Karen and Linda, the woman who had lured me into the scam. Karen assured me it was a smart investment, but in reality, it was a complete scam. I lost all my money, and when I asked for help, Karen told me I wasn't trying hard enough. Greg slowly turned to his wife. Karen, you promised you wouldn't get involved in any more of these schemes. Karen scoffed. Oh, please. It would have worked if she actually put in the effort. I clicked to the next slide. Career failure. The fake resume fiasco. I turned to my mom. Mom, remember when Karen insisted she'd help me get a real job? My mother nodded hesitantly. Well, she rewrote my resume, filled it with fake job experience, then told me to lie in interviews. I pulled up an email from one of the recruiters who had rejected me. I went to 6 interviews. 6. Every single one of them saw right through the lies and rejected me on the spot. My cousin Brian let out a low whistle. Damn. That's rough. I wasn't done. I clicked to the next slide. The professional wardrobe disaster. I gestured to myself. This entire outfit? Karen made me buy it. $2,000 wasted on this. Brian squinted. You look like an angry bank teller. I glared at him. Exactly. Not only did I waste money, but everyone at my co-working space made fun of me for showing up dressed like I was about to fire someone from a law firm. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, stop. You looked professional. Unlike those ridiculous cartoon t-shirts you normally wear. I ignored her and clicked to the final slide. The dating disasters. Oh, and let's not forget the 2 men Karen set me up with, I said. I turned to my Aunt Susan, Karen's sister. Susan, you're going to love this. The first guy spent 2 hours explaining cryptocurrency to me like I was a toddler. The second one wanted me to quit my job and be his full-time housewife. Susan's eyes widened. Karen. Seriously. Karen's face was turning red. I was just trying to help her find a good man. Unlike the losers she's dated before. I turned off the presentation and folded my arms. So, to summarize, I'm broke, unemployed, humiliated, and my dating life is a dumpster fire. And all of it happened because I followed your advice. Silence. Then my Uncle Greg let out a long sigh and rubbed his temples. Jesus Christ, Karen. Karen scowled. Oh, come on. She's exaggerating. I arched an eyebrow. Am I? Or is this just another example of you screwing up people's lives and pretending you didn't? That's when something unexpected happened. Other family members started speaking up. You know, my cousin Brian said, scratching his chin, I just remembered. Karen was the one who convinced me to invest in that hot stock a few years ago. Lost $3,000 in a week. Susan nodded. And she's the reason I took that disaster of a job at the marketing firm. Remember, Karen? You said it would open doors. Instead, I got stuck in the most toxic work environment ever. My mom spoke up next. Karen, didn't you tell me to refinance the house right before the interest rates went up? My dad's face darkened. She did. Karen was looking increasingly panicked. Oh, please. You all made your own choices. My grandmother, who had been silent until now, cleared her throat. Karen, she said firmly, I think it's time you stopped acting like you know everything. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For years, she had been the family's self-proclaimed expert on everything. And for years, people had trusted her, followed her advice, even when it led to disaster. But for the first time ever, they were seeing the truth. Karen wasn't wise. She wasn't successful. She wasn't the family's guiding light. She was just a loud, overconfident woman who had been wrong more times than anyone could count. Greg shook his head, clearly furious. Karen, we're going to have a serious conversation when we get home. Karen stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled over. This is ridiculous. I was trying to help. And this child, she pointed at me with shaking hands, is just bitter because she can't handle real life. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. No one stopped her. As the front door slammed behind her, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time in my life, Karen had lost control. And it felt amazing. I should have known Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. After publicly humiliating her at the family gathering, I assumed she would slink away, too embarrassed to show her face for a while. Maybe she'd throw a few passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat, but that would be the end of it. I was so wrong. It started with an unexpected message. A week after the showdown, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emily, we need to talk. Meet me at the Grand Cafe tomorrow at noon. It's important. Karen. I stared at the message, half convinced I was hallucinating. After everything she had done, she actually thought I would meet with her? Curiosity got the best of me. I agreed. When I arrived at the cafe, Karen was already there, sitting at a corner table with a perfectly composed expression. She was dressed in an expensive beige suit, her makeup immaculate. The moment I sat down, she slid an envelope across the table. $15,000, she said smoothly. Consider it an investment in your future. I blinked. Excuse me. Karen took a sip of her coffee and smiled. You humiliated me in front of the family, but that can be fixed. If you publicly retract everything you said and apologize for exaggerating, this money is yours. No strings attached. I let out a laugh. A genuine, shocked laugh. You think you can buy my loyalty? I asked, shaking my head. She raised an eyebrow. You need the money, don't you? You lost $5,000 in that business venture, and you're still jobless. My fingers tightened around my cup. Because of you. Karen waved a dismissive hand. Spare me the victim act. Life is about making smart choices, and this is a very smart choice for you. Take the money and we move on. You don't, and... She leaned forward, her smile sharpening. Things will get very unpleasant for you. I pushed the envelope back across the table. Keep your money, Karen. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she scoffed. Suit yourself. She grabbed the envelope and stood up, smoothing her blazer. You'll regret this. She walked out of the cafe without another word. I had no idea how serious that threat was until I received a court summons. Karen was suing me for defamation. I nearly choked on my coffee when I read the legal notice. She was claiming that my false accusations had irreparably damaged her reputation and caused severe emotional distress. She wanted $50,000 in damages. The worst part? She had actually hired a lawyer, some sleazy, overly confident guy named Mitchell Crane, who specialized in reputation management. She's out of her mind, I said, pacing in my tiny apartment as my best friend Rachel scrolled through the lawsuit documents. Rachel let out a low whistle. Damn. She's really going for it. You need a lawyer. I sighed. I can't afford a lawyer. Rachel smirked. Then it's a good thing your cousin Brian knows a guy. Enter David Lynn, the best thing to happen to me during this entire mess. David was a young, ambitious attorney, one of Brian's old college buddies, who hated frivolous lawsuits with a passion. When I told him the situation, he laughed. This is the weakest defamation case I've ever seen, he said. She's got no evidence, and we have multiple witnesses. Honestly, Emily, we can destroy her in court. For the first time since receiving the lawsuit, I felt hope. Let's do it. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later, but Karen didn't waste time making my life miserable in the meantime. She started a smear campaign. Family members started receiving emails, long dramatic messages about how I had ruined her life, how I was a manipulative liar, and how she was simply seeking justice. She posted vague rants on Facebook about betrayal from within and entitled children who don't understand respect. She even called my mother in tears, sobbing about how I had turned everyone against her. My mom, bless her, simply said, "Karen, you did that all by yourself," and hung up. By the time we got to court, Karen was seething. She had expected me to back down. She had assumed I would be too scared to fight her. Instead, I showed up with David Lynn, a stack of evidence, and half the family as witnesses. Karen's lawyer, Mitchell, strutted in like he was about to win the case of the century. He started his opening argument with dramatic flair. Your Honor, my client has been deeply wounded by the defendant's baseless attacks. Her reputation, once highly respected, has been shattered. She has suffered extreme emotional distress, lost personal and professional opportunities, and has been unfairly vilified by her own family. David stood up. Your Honor, we have proof that every single claim Emily made was true. What followed was a legal massacre. David presented screenshots of Karen's texts and emails, proving she had convinced me to invest in the pyramid scheme. Copies of my fake resume, edited by Karen herself. Emails from recruiters rejecting me due to the fabricated work experience. Photos of my $2,000 professional wardrobe disaster, including messages from friends mocking my sudden transformation. Testimonies from multiple family members, all of whom had their own stories about Karen's terrible advice. Karen's face turned redder and redder with every new piece of evidence. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge was not amused. After 3 days of hearings, the verdict was clear. Karen had no case. The judge dismissed her lawsuit with prejudice, meaning she could never file it again, and in a delicious twist, ordered her to pay me $20,000 for wasting the court's time. Karen lost it. She stormed out of the courtroom, ranting about ungrateful brats and corrupt systems. But the damage was done. Her credibility? Gone. Her influence in the family? Shattered. No one was listening to her anymore. No one cared what she had to say. I could have kept the money. God knows I needed it after the financial disaster she put me through. But instead, I donated every penny to a women's shelter. Karen heard about it, of course. She called me furious. You're an idiot. That money was yours. You earned it. I just smiled. Oh, I know. But you see, Karen, I don't need your money. And now, you can't hurt me anymore. For the first time in my life, Karen had nothing to say. I hung up, took a deep breath, and walked away from her for good. The first thing I noticed after Karen's downfall was the silence, a peaceful, blissful silence that settled over family gatherings like a long overdue blessing. For the first time in years, people actually talked to each other instead of waiting for Karen to dictate the conversation. No one had to walk on eggshells, bracing for her passive-aggressive remarks or unsolicited life advice. It was as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. And honestly, it was glorious. The transformation happened slowly at first. At the next family dinner, Karen-free, of course, there was an awkward pause where everyone almost expected her to swoop in with her usual dramatic monologue. But when no one interrupted, people started talking for real. Susan told us about her new job, one she had actually chosen without Karen's interference. My cousin Brian shared a hilarious story about his coworkers. Even my mom, usually the peacekeeper, opened up about her plans to take up painting again, something she had always wanted to do but had put off for years because Karen had once dismissed it as a waste of time. I saw my dad relax in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. He no longer had to sit through Karen's long-winded lectures about financial wisdom or how he should be guiding me toward a real career. Without Karen, we were just a normal family, imperfect, but happy. Meanwhile, I was picking up the pieces of my life. With Karen out of my way, I fully committed to rebuilding my freelance career. I spent hours updating my portfolio, reaching out to old clients, and promoting my work online. Within a month, the commissions started rolling in again. By the third month, I had more work than I could handle. One of my past clients, a small publishing company, reached out with an exciting offer, designing cover art for an upcoming fantasy book series. It was exactly the kind of creative work I had always dreamed of doing. I signed the contract without hesitation. Financial stability followed quickly after. I paid off my debts, built up my savings, and even splurged a little on things I actually wanted, not stiff blazers and corporate prison wear. I bought new art supplies, redecorated my apartment, and treated myself to a weekend getaway with Rachel. For the first time in a long time, I felt like me again. Of course, Karen wasn't going to disappear quietly. Humiliated and stripped of her influence, she tried to rewrite history. She started spreading wild stories among her friends, telling them that the family had turned against her because she was the only one with real wisdom, that we were jealous of her success, that she had been betrayed by ungrateful relatives. The problem? No one believed her. Not only had she lost her credibility within the family, but she had spent so many years bossing people around that even her so-called friends had little sympathy. One of her former friends, Lisa, even sent my mom a screenshot of a group chat where the other women were roasting Karen behind her back. She did the same thing to me. Told me to invest in that foolproof real estate deal, and I lost $10,000. Karen gave me marriage advice once. If I had listened, I'd be divorced by now. I stopped inviting her to brunch because she literally wouldn't shut up about how my career was unstable. Meanwhile, she has never had a job. Word spread fast. Karen wasn't an expert. She was a fraud. Without her usual audience, Karen tried to worm her way back into the family. She sent out a massive email, dripping with faux humility. I've reflected on everything, and I realize now that I only wanted what was best for all of you. I forgive you all for the way you treated me. Let's move forward as a family. Brian responded first. Karen, this isn't an apology. Also, no one needs your forgiveness. We're doing just fine without you. Susan chimed in next. Exactly. If you want to be part of the family again, start by actually respecting people's choices. My dad? We're done letting you control the conversation. If you want to talk to us, you'll listen too. No more lectures, no more unsolicited advice. If you can't respect that, you don't get to be part of this family anymore. It was the first time ever that the entire family had set clear boundaries. Karen's response? Silence. She didn't show up to the next gathering. Or the one after that. Slowly, her influence faded into nothing. With Karen finally out of my life, I felt free in a way I had never experienced before. And it wasn't just about her, it was about me. I had spent so many years doubting myself, letting her voice drown out my own. I had let her words chip away at my confidence, making me question whether my dreams were valid. But now, I had proven to myself, to my family, and to Karen that I didn't need her approval. I had built my life on my own terms. And the best part? I wasn't alone. Without Karen's toxicity poisoning our relationships, our family grew closer than ever. We planned trips together. We had game nights. We laughed more. For the first time, our family wasn't about control. It was about love. One evening, as I was wrapping up work, I received a message from a stranger on social media. Hey Emily, I just wanted to say, your story really inspired me. I've been dealing with a toxic family member for years, and reading what you went through made me realize I don't have to let them control my life. Thank you for sharing your story. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I hadn't set out to be an inspiration. I had just wanted my life back. But if my story helped even one person break free from a toxic influence, that was worth more than anything Karen had ever taken from me. I smiled, typed out a quick response, and closed my laptop. For the first time in forever, my future was mine, and mine alone.